He looks at shallow conversations, at polished smiles, at the superficial connections that fill his days now, and he feels an emptiness he can't quite name. He remembers how he used to complain about your intensity. Why do you have to feel everything so deeply? Why does every conversation have to be so meaningful? Why can't we just relax without analyzing everything? He said you were too intense, that your depth suffocated him, that he needed space to breathe. Now he is drowning in shallow waters. You feel it, don't you? That connection that persists even in silence, even at a distance. You're not imagining it. It's happening right now as you listen to me. If you're watching this video right now, it's not a coincidence. It's because there's a message here just for you. Too intense. You've heard those words before, haven't you? As if feeling deeply was a flaw, as if seeing beyond the surface was a defect, as if your ability to dive into the meaning of things was something to be fixed, not celebrated. He used those words like a shield against the truth that your presence forced him to confront, that he himself lived on the surface of things, that he avoided the depths because he feared what he might find there. It was easier to say you were too intense than to admit he was too shallow, so he pulled away. He sought calmer waters, relationships without depth, conversations that never went beyond the weather or the day's news, and for a time, he felt relief. Relief from not being confronted with his own uncharted depths, relief from not having to dive beyond the comfortable surface where he always dwelled. But nature abhors a vacuum, and the human soul, even when it tries to deny it, yearns for meaning. Now, surrounded by empty conversations and superficial connections, he begins to feel a growing discomfort, a thirst that no water seems to quench, a hunger that no food can satisfy. It's the lack of depth that he feels, the intensity he once criticized so much, the ability to turn an ordinary moment into something extraordinary, simply by the way you experienced it, felt it, understood it. You carried a different light. While most people illuminate only the surface of things, your light penetrated deep into the depths. It revealed layers that most prefer not to see. It showed truths that the majority choose to ignore, and this was terrifying for him, because in your light, he could no longer pretend, he could no longer hide, he could no longer avoid the parts of himself that he preferred not to face. So he said you were too intense, when in reality you were simply too real. Now he walks through days filled with exactly what he asked for: superficiality, lightness, a lack of intensity. And he discovers a truth that you always knew. A life without depth is not life. It's just existence. It's just passing the time until time runs out. In those rare moments of honesty with himself, those fleeting moments between waking and being fully awake, or between consciousness and sleep, he admits he misses your gaze that saw beyond appearances, your voice that spoke truths that others dared not utter, your heart that felt the world with an intensity that he in his cowardice called too much. He used to say you suffocated him with your depth. Now he is suffocating in the absence of it. You feel this change, don't you? This different energy in the air, this quiet yet powerful transformation taking place inside him, even though you have no contact with each other. It's no coincidence that you're hearing these words right now. The universe has its own timing, its own wisdom, which often transcends our limited understanding. As you go through your life, it is there, beginning to awaken to the truth you have always embodied. That intensity is not something to be avoided, but embraced. That depth is not a burden, but a gift. That fully feeling is not a flaw, but perhaps the only real purpose of being alive. He now looks at the people around him and realizes no one sees him as you did. No one listens to him as you listened. No one perceives the nuances, the details, the contradictions that he noticed so naturally. He goes through experiences that should be meaningful and feels almost nothing. A brief moment of pleasure, perhaps, a superficial satisfaction, but not that deep reverberation, that expanded understanding, that feeling that something truly matters that he experienced in your presence. And he begins to question, was the problem really his intensity, or was it his own inability to dive into the depths you navigated with such ease? In moments of solitude, when distractions cease and silence settles in, that truth emerges with the most strength. It's when he feels your absence not just as an empty space, but as an absence of meaning, of color, of texture, of depth. It's when he remembers how you talked about the stars, about dreams, about the little synchronicities of everyday life that for him were just coincidences, but for you were signs, messages, confirmations that there is something greater connecting everything. Do you remember how he laughed? How he said you saw meaning where there was none? How he insisted that you complicated what was simple? Now he looks up at the starry sky and feels nothing. He reflects on the events of his life and sees no pattern at all. He gazes at the people around him and cannot see beyond the social masks that we all wear. And he realizes what he lost by losing you. He lost the ability to see life through your eyes, to feel the world through your heart, to understand existence through your soul. He said you were too intense. Now he misses your depth like a man in the desert misses water. Dreams are especially revealing. Those moments when the conscious mind relaxes its grip and allows deeper truths to surface. How many times has he woken up with the feeling that he had talked to you, that he had finally expressed what he truly felt, that he had admitted his intensity wasn't the problem, it was the gift he wasn't ready to receive. These dreams leave a residue, a feeling of loss that lingers throughout the day, a longing not for little moments, shared habits, or interrupted routines, but for the depth you brought to his life. You notice these signs, don't you? Those inexplicable moments when you wake up in the middle of the night, sensing a presence, an energy, a call that you can't put into words. It's him, thinking of you, remembering your light, missing the depth he so often criticized. At night, when you wake up for no apparent reason, do you know what happened? He thought of you with such intensity that your spirit felt the call across the distance, through the silence, across time. I feel that many of you who are listening to me right now recognize this dynamic. Perhaps you are that person whose intensity was rejected. Perhaps you are the one who, in offering depth, received criticism instead of gratitude. Know this: your intensity is not a flaw to be corrected. Your depth is not a problem to be solved. Your ability to feel fully, to see clearly, to understand deeply, this is not too much. It is just enough. It is precisely what this world needs the most. As he continues his journey, slowly awakening to the truth that you have always embodied, you carry on with yours, bringing your light to where it is appreciated, your intensity to where it is celebrated, your depth to where it is welcomed as the gift it truly is. And perhaps it is this fidelity to your own nature that will ultimately create the space for a new kind of connection. Because the more you become who you really are, the harder it becomes for him to ignore what he has lost. The paths of life are mysterious. True connections are never completely severed. They are merely transformed. They are just redirected. And sometimes you have to lose something precious to finally recognize its value. He said you were too intense. But he is discovering in the most painful way possible that he now misses your depth like a blind man would miss the light. You always knew, didn't you? On some deep level, you always understood that the problem was never your intensity. It was his fear of diving into the same deep waters where you swam so effortlessly. And maybe that's why, despite everything, you never fundamentally changed who you are. Perhaps that's why, despite the criticism, you maintained your ability to feel deeply, to see clearly, to fully exist. And it is precisely that authenticity that now seems so precious, so rare, so irreplaceable to him. He said you were too intense. But now, surrounded by people who never challenge him, in conversations that never provoke him, in experiences that never transform him, he sees the truth. You weren't too intense. The world is just too shallow. And your depth, which he once rejected, now seems to be the only antidote for the emptiness that consumes his days. You who are listening to me now know that your intensity is a gift, that your depth is a strength, that your ability to feel fully is perhaps the greatest wealth we can have in this life. Do not downplay it to comfort those who fear their own depths. Do not hide it to accommodate those who prefer to live on the surface. Do not deny it to satisfy those who confuse intensity with imbalance. Because what he is discovering now, and what you have always known, is that a life without depth can hardly be called a life. It's merely existence, just passing the time until time runs out. And no one, at the end of the journey, laments having felt too much, having loved too much, having lived too much. He said you were too intense. Now he misses your depth like parched land misses the rain. And this truth, this revelation, is changing everything within him. You feel this transformation, don't you? This shift in energy, this silent yet powerful evolution that is occurring, even though you are not in contact. It's no coincidence that you are here, listening to these words that seem to speak directly to your soul. The universe has its own timing, its own wisdom, which often transcends our limited understanding. He can continue on the path he chose. He can keep avoiding the depths that you navigated so naturally. He can keep seeking the superficiality he once believed he desired. But the truth? The truth has already found its way to the surface. And once the truth emerges, there's no way to submerge it again. You always knew, didn't you? At some deep level, you always understood that your intensity was not a flaw, but a gift that he was not yet ready to receive. And that's why, despite everything, you never completely lost your essence. That's why, despite the criticisms, you kept your ability to feel deeply, to see clearly, to exist fully. The paths of destiny are mysterious. True connections are never entirely broken. They are only transformed, only redirected. Trust the process, dear. Trust your intuition. Trust the signs the universe is sending you. He said you were too intense. But now in the superficiality he chose, he is discovering the most painful truth of all, that he misses your depth like lungs miss air. And that truth is changing everything. He looks up at the starry sky and wonders if you are also gazing at it somewhere. He hears a significant song and wonders if it still resonates with you as it did before. He experiences a moment of unexpected beauty and for a brief instant, desperately wishes he could share it with you, the only person who would truly appreciate it in all its depth. The connection remains, invisible to the eyes, but palpable to the soul. You who are listening to me now, know that this story is not over yet. There are still chapters to be written. The universe is still orchestrating movements that neither of you can even imagine. Trust that intuition. Trust those signs. Trust in that connection that withstands time, distance, and even the harsh words that were spoken, because the truth is already emerging, slowly but inexorably, like the first light of dawn after a long night of darkness. He said, "You were too intense." But now he misses your depth like the moon misses the sun in the darkness of night. And that truth, dear, is finally coming to light.